We were living in the same house outside of Langley Field, which at that time had a large facility of NACA, which was the predecessor of NASA, the National Advisory Committee of Aeronautics. I was used to hearing airplanes fly over the house all the time, but this one night, it was probably around 7:30 or 8 o'clock, I heard this swishing noise come by the house. And it was fast, but it was so totally unique and strange that it made an impression on me. I had no idea what it was until I began hearing about some of the Foo Fighters in Germany that had come out that were jet propelled, and I could draw a correlation between the two very easily. After the war was over, we began bringing a lot of things back from overseas. I remember they brought a German U-boat to Fort Monroe, to the piers at Fort Monroe. And during the same period of time, NACA had an open house one weekend. And I headed over to NACA to one of the wind tunnels because I'm interested in aircraft and all. And in the wind tunnel was what I described as a flying saucer. There was no doubt about the form of the craft that was there. 25, 35 feet in diameter, probably 4 or 5 feet in depth and thickness, but then it just tapered down on the ends. But I got as close to it as maybe 10 feet, and it was on a pedestal. It was propped up. And I thought, that is a strange craft. And this was before the UFO interest began developing. But this had been brought back from Germany, and it was in the wind tunnel. My curiosity was, how is this maneuvered? One section of the slant had a plexiglass canopy over it. And from what I was told, whoever was the pilot would lie down prone and fly this craft from a prone position, and the plastic was over the edge of the flying saucer. And I could say, average pilot could get in. As to how it was propelled, I don't know. I don't remember seeing exhaust. There were no propellers. It wasn't one of those lighter than aircraft by any means. There was no visible means of propulsion. So I always took a camera with me whenever I went up. And this one particular afternoon, I'd been up probably a half an hour, and I monitored the airport and the tower to make sure that I was not getting in anybody's way. I usually flew at around 2,000 feet because it's legal minimums over populated areas. And I happened to catch his transmission from the tower. And I don't know who he was talking to. He didn't talk to me particularly, but I monitored it. And so there was a disc-shaped object coming in from the west. And I thought, well, this is a pretty good opportunity. I'll take a look and see if I could see it. And I guess now, if I would estimate altitude somewhere, probably not less than 50,000 feet and on up. So I called the tower after they were making people alert of what was coming over the area. And the tower said, what do you want to do? And I said, if you don't mind, would you release me from 2,000, let me go to 12, which was my maximum altitude without oxygen. And they said, well, go right ahead. And it took me several minutes to climb from 2 to 12. And I got up, and about that time, this silver ball was passing over. And I took a number of shots on 35 millimeter film as it was going over. And next thing I knew, it was gone. And after I got down, I asked what happened, and they said, well, they had alerted the fighters at Langley to go up and take a look at what it was, and by the time they could get scrambled and get in the air and get to that altitude, it was gone. Since I was working at a station that was owned by the newspaper, I felt free to go to the newspaper, into the photo lab, and I said, I'm really curious as to what we've got here. And if you don't mind, let's develop this film right now. So I gave it to the photographer in charge, who was a friend. He developed it, and you could see the silver ball in the picture. And And I said, well, let's carry it a little bit further. If you don't mind, let's magnify this. Let's blow it up. And finally we blew it up. I don't know how many times we blew it up until we got to the point where the silver ball filled the whole frame of an 8x10. It was fuzzy, but it was a magnification of what we had just taken. And after we magnified it, it wasn't a circular ball anymore. It was a football-shaped object, more like a cigar-shaped object. It came to points on either end. I didn't make it known to anybody, but somehow somebody knew I had it, and I got a call probably about 6-8 weeks later. And they said, we're into this area of gathering information on possible UFOs and things like that, and understand that you took some pictures and all. Would you mind loaning them to us so that we could, just take a look? And I didn't ask for credentials or anything like that. And I said, well, in addition to pictures, I also have kind of an interesting collection of news items that have come over AP for the past 5-10 years even. Maybe not that long, probably 5 years. And they said, we'll bring those along. We'd like, we're interested and we'd like to look at that. And they gave me an address over in the Fan District in Richmond. It was one of the older homes. I went in, the man that had called me introduced himself and said, we're real grateful if you bring these over. We'll take good care of them and get them back to you. And
Did he say who he was with?
Didn't say who he was with, never identified himself. And
government?
Never told me who he was. Just very, very normal. The house was not furnished as though it was a home. It was very lightly furnished. It was an older home and didn't have anything in it of any value, as I recall. No antiques and no oriental rugs or anything. And in fact, it was kind of shabby. And it kind of made me curious as to what he did and who else was in the house. But I turned it over to him, and I thought, well, I'll call me when you're finished, or else I'll come back and get it. And he didn't call me for, I don't know, like 2-3 weeks. And I thought, well, that's enough time. And since I didn't hear from him, I didn't have his telephone number, I thought I'd go on back to the house and pick it up. I went back to the house, and the house was empty. There was nobody there. I have no idea who the person was. I was very naive. And more so because I didn't keep a negative on it. And I didn't keep a print. These were original things that I had. And the newspaper didn't keep a copy either, because when we did that, we were just doing it for our own interest. It wasn't for print or publication. And they disappeared from my life forever.